Hey everybody, what's up? Aaron right here, Question Period Canada. Curious to see what you're going to think about this video. I think that you will find it very interesting. It's an interview between FREELAND a ways back with George Soros. Like, you know who that guy is. He's a heavy hitter, a big player in the world, kind of a dictator within a country, like something like that. And that's pretty much it. Let's jump right into the video. Let's get it going. This is the main stage, and here we go.
Good evening. Welcome to the last segment of the 6th Annual INET Plenary. I think this is a rather extraordinary way to conclude things, but you can tell me what you think after dinner. I'd like to introduce William Janeway, who is one of the co-founders of INET, and just an extraordinary businessman, extraordinary intellectual, extraordinary economist. Bill?
Thank you, Rob.
Look at these clowns.
Theorist practitioner is a term I first heard used by the great and no longer neglected economist Hyman Minsky. That term has stayed with me because he actually, in making an introduction, applied it to me. Now, I want to redeploy that term at a scale that is amplified by orders of magnitude. Because George Soros is a theorist practitioner who has drawn upon his deep mastery of the financial markets and both the sources and consequences of what happens in financial markets for the real economy to develop and define a framework through which it is possible to understand what is going on. In doing that, George follows a very small number of people whose names you will know. The two that come to mind are David Ricardo and John Maynard Keynes. And with that, George, I would very much like to invite you out here to enter into conversation with Chrystia Freeland, also a hybrid who moved from a brilliant career as a commentator on economics and finance to an active role as a progressive politician and member of parliament in Canada. And I only hope that Christia's work in Canada will spill over south of the border to the United States. With that, thank you very much.
Imagine you're trying to dominate the world and you're hoping Canada can get you into the States. Like, oh Lord. Anyways, this is going to be, I think it's like a 45-minute piece. Like, we'll see.
By the way, I consider myself a practitioner of fallibility.
Oh my God.
We'll see how well
looks
you
like
fail
he's dead.
tonight, George. Okay, thank you everybody for being here. George's team felt that the space was not really conducive to Q&A because it's such a long haul. So it's just going to be me asking George questions, and I'm going to try to channel all the questions that everyone would have wanted me to ask. You can yell at me afterwards if I don't ask the right ones. Okay, so George, the Munich Security Conference this year, which you spoke at, had the title Global Disorder. Is that right? Are we living in a particularly disordered time? That's one of your areas of expertise. What's going on?
No, I agree with that because the global governance is failing, and you have all kinds of crises all over the world, and instead of, and they might be solvable by themselves, but actually they
I
fester.
just want to
They don't
be
get
here in the
solved,
window and make
they
fun of all of
accumulate.
this. But
and
I know it looks
and,
better in the other window.
They are all interconnected in a reflexive fashion, affecting
looks like he's
the others
dead, though.
and being affected by them. And the losers in particular crises become spoilers in the other crises. And that's what makes it so difficult to resolve them. So the world is becoming extremely complicated. Until a few months ago, I thought I could sort of follow most of them, the crisis in the world, but it has become, I think, practically impossible.
How many years do you think he
particularly
thought
in the Middle
he had
East?
left?
Because
like,
there,
that was a long time ago.
The enemy of your enemies used to be your friend, but that's no longer true, and that makes things extremely complicated.
Okay, George, I wondered when we would get to reflexivity, and I have a timer here in front of me. You hit it at 1 minute, 30 seconds, so that's pretty good. Okay, so crises. Let's move and focus specifically on Europe, where we are. You have spoken often and written about the power of the European idea as a very inspiring idea. You've even talked about it as a fantastical object for you. That seems quite distant from Europe today, but talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. Well, I wrote a book, The Tragedy of the European Union, and to sum it up, the European Union was a very inspiring idea for people like me. I considered it the embodiment of the idea of an open society, like-minded countries getting together, sacrificing part of their
What
sovereignty
about that
for
sounds
the common
good.
And it was meant to be a voluntary association of equals. And because of the
Listen
Euro
to the
crisis,
jargon he's
it has
using.
already been transformed into something radically different, because the Euro crisis created a difference between creditors and debtors. So those are two different classes, and the debtors had difficulties in meeting their obligations, and that put the creditors in charge. And they set the rules, and the rules that they set made it very difficult for the debtors to exit their inferior status. And so this voluntary association of equals turned into an involuntary association of unequals.
Listen
for
to this
people,
guy.
Under
imagine
50 today,
one of the
for
most
me,
powerful
for the older
men
generation,
ever
Europe was an inspiring
exist.
idea. But for the young people, particularly in the heavily indebted countries, the European Union seems to be the enemy, because it has made their future uncertain and not very appealing. So the European Union is currently in deep trouble.
Is there a way out? Can this fantastical object be saved, or is the European Union now, as you've written, as you just said, a foreign oppressor for young Europeans?
Well, basically, the euro is here to stay because Draghi has said, do whatever it takes to make it work, and he had the backing of Angela Merkel in doing that. So he had the ability to deliver on that. So it's the financial crisis has largely been transformed into a sort of emerging and developing political crisis. But Europe has been very good at muddling through. But now you have two existential crises Greece and Ukraine. And two crises at the same time may be a little bit too much, so there's a danger that this time the muddling through won't work.
Okay, so let's talk about those crises. Maybe start with Greece. You've described it as an existential crisis.
Well, Ukraine was mishandled from the beginning by all parties concerned. And it got worse and worse. So actually, now, the best you can, the most constructive outcome is muddling through. But Ukraine is very different. And unfortunately, the European Union treats
Look at those deadbeats.
Ukraine as yet another Greece. And that is absolutely the wrong approach.
Okay, so why is it so wrong? I mean, from a distance, you could see a lot of similarities, right? You know, both countries celebrating Easter this weekend. They have oligarchs. They have kind of crumbling governments. Don't they have a lot in common?
Well, Ukraine was very much like Greece, with oligarchs, a non-functioning government, a bureaucracy that was in many ways using its position for private gain rather than to serve the people. Greece resembles, has many similarities to the old Ukraine. But there is what I call a new Ukraine, which is determined to get rid of all the rottenness of the old Ukraine. And that's the new Ukraine that Europe has difficulty in recognizing. And so that's why they treat...
What in the hell is he talking about?
Ukraine,
old Ukraine,
like the
new
old
Ukraine? This is
or
old.
Like
this
Greece.
is long before,
And what's the
even
difference?
when they
I mean,
changed
what
their
makes the
government
new
in
Ukraine
2014.
new?
Well, what they saw this all
really
coming. Oh my God!
So
obvious.
Basically, the rise of civil society that spontaneously rebelled against a continuation when the association agreement was offered, and then Putin outbid the European Union, which wasn't very difficult, and offered $15 billion. And Yanukovych then made a deal with Putin, and the people then rebelled. They went to Maidan and they protested. And Putin said to Yanukovych, before you get your first $3 billion, you've got to get rid of those people in Maidan. And basically ordered Yanukovych to use force. And this was a fatal mistake on the part of Putin that he's now trying to remedy as best he can, because he simply is not within his view of the world to believe that people will actually act spontaneously and even risk their lives for a political cause. When they wanted to clear the square, people, instead of running away, ran to Maidan. And that was the first time that Yanukovych actually was forced out of power. And then, when he was already out of power, and already Putin was in Sochi and had Yanukovych brought to him and ordered him to use live ammunition, which was in February of 2014.
What's up,
again,
Canadian?
the
We're
people,
watching George Soros.
instead of
It's
running
one of the most
away,
powerful
actually
men ever
attacked,
in history.
the
but
snipers
he's like
and
truly
chased
a
them
German.
away.
I think
And that was
he
sort of
has American citizenship, but
a
like
very remarkable event, and that was the birth of the new Ukraine.
Was that George civil society in action? You've been working on
She's
helping
the
to build
problem
civil
for
society,
Canada,
trying to
though.
build it,
Like-
often frustrated in the former Soviet Union.
How
in
much
the Soviet
makeup is
Union.
she
I
wearing?
know you started. I first
Imagine.
met you in Ukraine in 1990
she has
when you began
sunken
those
dark
efforts.
eyes like a raccoon.
There were many years, I
Like,
think, when it seemed it was all useless.
for her to have like a normal looking.
Does it say something to you,
woman
teach you
face.
something about open society, civil society building?
Imagine how much makeup
Well, yes,
that takes.
because basically, in many ways, I set up the foundation in Ukraine in 1990, which was 2 years before the independence of Ukraine. That was it was an offshoot of the foundation in Russia. You know, I set up
I just know it
Cultural
looks better in the other
Initiative
window.
Foundation in the Soviet Union in 1987, and then we built this branch in Ukraine in 1990, and the foundation. One of the things that the foundation did gave a lot of scholarships and supported civil society, and the maturity of civil society 25 years later is to a large extent the work of the foundation.
Yeah, and I will just offer my own personal testimony
He
here.
looks,
It's actually amazing.
120
in
years
Ukraine,
old?
The new Ukrainian government, the
And
new Ukrainian
again,
leadership.
I've already joked
Everyone
about it,
who
but
I
how
know
much
in that
makeup
group has been touched somehow by
is
open
she
society
wearing?
and by George. Like
lot.
literally, either people personally got a scholarship, or someone, their wife got a scholarship. It's a really remarkable thing.
Well, this was, for me, quite an experience to see this, and I didn't realize, actually, how big an effect it has had over a 25-year period, because those were students. 25 years later, they were leaders.
So, George, the way you describe Ukraine, and that's where my own sympathies lie also,
do
is
they?
incredibly appealing. It maybe is
What a
another one of
surprise.
these fantastical objects. But not all Europeans agree with us. The leader of your own homeland, Hungary, has described Putin as a model, as a role model. We have political leaders across Europe. We have the Greeks right now making trips to Moscow. We have in France, Marine Le Pen having close contacts with Putin. How do you explain this influence, this appeal that Putin has in Europe?
Yeah. Well, I think I can take a historical perspective, because I was very much involved in the collapse of the Soviet system. That was my debut as what I call myself a political philanthropist. And this is déjà vu for me. but there are some fundamental differences between now and then, because then it was a collapsing, a moribund Soviet Union that really collapsed of its own weight. And you had the European Union emerging. It was as you call it, a fantastic object that was very, very attractive. I was really, and I still am, a great believer in that idea. So that's the big difference, because now you have a resurgent Russia, a country that has gone through a great deal of, we had basically a revolution and a restoration. And the restoration brought about a new form of more or less the same kind of regime, but it has instead of a kind of an international universal thing, it's based on nationalism. And in fact, it's sort of two roots. One is sort of ethnic, the exceptionalism of the Slavic race, and Holy Russia. So this is a more, it's a new ideology and very effective. And it's based on a lot of resentment. In that respect, it's resembling interwar Germany, basically the Nazi regime, which was also nationalistic and also based on resentment. And it's got considerable vigor.
Well, that's a very frightening parallel you've just drawn. You've spoken, George, and written about how Russia and Putin has the tactical advantage in his confrontations. Why is that? And is there any way to shift what's happening on that chessboard?
Well, Putin is definitely the initiator, but he's acting out of a weak position, and one should not, although he's temporarily successful, one should not ignore the fundamental weakness
temporarily
of that
successful
regime, which is basically an exploitative regime. It's
like it or not, Putin is amazing at what he's like. Imagine
people are basically
what he accomplished.
Using
you don't have to be
their position
like
as
happy about
rulers
it, but just to appreciate what he has done.
Well, earn rents, if you like,
a lot.
Collect tributes, and have an ideology that gets support, but basically exploiting the people. So one thing one should not identify Russia and the interests, let's say the geopolitical interests of Russia with the Putin regime, because the Putin regime's first interest is to preserve itself in power and to maximize its rents. And how weak it is shown by the people who do the exploitation and send the rents abroad. One of the fundamental weaknesses of the Russian system, is that the capital flight, because the people have no confidence in the regime itself, and they realize that their ill-gotten gains could be taken away from them at any time unless they send it abroad. So they basically send their children abroad to be educated abroad, and they send their ill-gotten gains abroad.
You have described in pretty stark terms, George, these, the disorder in the world, and in particular the two existential crises Europe faces. Angela Merkel is clearly the most powerful leader in Europe. How do you think she's dealing with these challenges?
Well, she has acted as a European statesman in confronting the threat of Putin's Russia, and has gone further. A democratic leader tends to follow public opinion rather than lead it. But here she stuck her neck out much further on that issue than on any other. So she I think partly because of her background in East Germany, she recognized it early. So she has been, in that sense, a true leader of Europe. But she also has some misconceptions, particularly in the economic sphere, austerity and the sort of the Bundesbank orthodoxy. So, I mean, to understand the situation, you do need new economic thinking.
Well, good that we're here then. Is a Europe which is constrained by this Bundesbank austerity going to have the political will and the vigor to respond to these big existential challenges?
Well, that's really the big issue, because, as I said earlier, at the moment, treating Ukraine as yet another Greece is the wrong approach, and if you persist in it, eventually Ukraine could turn into another Greece. That is to say,
how much makeup
that the
is
new
she wearing?
Ukraine could become like the old Ukraine under the stress of
She
this,
must be wearing a lot
what you
of
might
makeup,
call
'cause, like,
drip feeding.
She has
because,
dark, sunken eyes like that of a dead raccoon.
Economic support that Ukraine needs.
She looks okay here.
Is
She
always
looks good,
coming too
even,
late
like-
and too little.
Kind of like.
As we've discussed, you've been involved in Ukraine and in the
How
former
much
Soviet Union
makeup
for many,
is
many
that, though?
years. You recently made quite a dramatic announcement about being willing to really put your money where your mouth is when it comes to Ukraine. This announcement of a possible $1 billion
It's a pretty
investment,
amazing makeup job.
private
like,
business investment
agreed,
in Ukraine.
right?
It reminded me a little bit of, remember that Russian investment? When you
Well,
got very excited.
Well, I hope that I won't repeat. I mentioned earlier, I'm a practitioner of fallibility, but I hope that this time I won't make the same. I think making the same mistake twice would be too much.
I agree. So what motivates, so having made that Russian mistake, having been very open with yourself and the world about it being a mistake, what's motivated you to put this idea forward, and do you think it will actually be possible? Is it going to help lead the change?
Well, that comes back to your earlier question of is there a way to regain in the initiative. And I think there has to be a way. And if that could be accomplished, then Ukraine would be a very attractive investment opportunity. So
He knows about
I think
planning the future.
The possibility of
Imagine when
of
you're
turning the
85, you'd be
situation
doing
around
this.
is there. But right now, Ukraine,
hard to understand.
Putin is actually gaining ground or has been gaining ground. Actually, I rather think that we may have passed the peak of that. It's a little too early to say, but I think just the events of the last week or two give me hope that it actually maybe we have it's always darkest before dawn. I see some signs of the thing turning around, and we can go into it why. But at any rate, Putin has had the initiative, and he still does have that, because his aim, his optimum aim in Ukraine is not to have a military victory that would give him control over part of Ukraine, mainly eastern part, but also responsibility.
How old is George Soros? 500?
With control goes responsibility. So he doesn't want part of Ukraine. He wants to destabilize all of Ukraine, and preferably in a way that he can disclaim responsibility. That's his sort of
part of the thing I don't understand about
that he's aiming
humanity
for.
is like,
and
why is he like the leader
he's already
of,
shown,
or
so I'm not
the cream of the crop?
The construction on my part or a guess. It's
I guarantee he couldn't mow a ball field faster than I could.
Twice he has traded in, converted,
or run faster, or do more push-ups, or
military victory into a ceasefire that
just don't get this part of
hopefully bring about a financial crisis and a political collapse of Ukraine.
I guarantee she's worse at everything than any of us.
And if you compare the two, you can see
all
how
of
much
us
progress
are normal
is made
people
on
that
the
are
ground,
capable and do a good job.
Those that has
I
been
don't know if they are, though.
Recognized, and
so
at the same time, he has not given up any of his options, so he can switch from a hybrid war to hybrid peace, or and back again. So he has the initiative. So you need to first of all get equal and have options, and having done that, eventually you could, and then you need a strategy that would change the current regime, where Ukraine is barely given enough to survive, to actually being given a lot more
who
budgetary
cares
support,
about the Ukraine?
And also
it's a tiny country, like
additional
not
support
in size,
that would
but like by
attract
population,
private
it's so small.
because it's really the inflow
It's
of
about the
private
size of
capital
Canada, a little
that
bit
would
bigger.
make the Ukrainian economy work.
I've heard there's a hedge fund guy in New York who wants to invest $1 billion, so that's a start.
Well, that's exactly why I put it up there, and just for the record, I made it clear that it is for
She's
profit,
kinda gross, I
not
think.
for loss. But the profits will go to the foundation and not to me personally, so that I can't be accused
Do you understand it? Because I don't understand, like,
doing it
how
to
a person
make a
like her
killing.
gets
But I
into
think,
such a powerful
that
position
if things work out
with
well,
the
I
skill
would
set
make a
that she
killing
has.
by
don't
investing
understand.
in Ukraine.
Okay, so George, I've been suffering some cognitive dissonance in this conversation because here we are probably in the most magnificent room in which I have ever interviewed anybody. People who didn't have to talk like us were having some magnificent champagne, and yet you're talking about these twin existential crises facing Europe. You made a very terrifying allusion to the Weimar period. Can you sketch out, can you imagine, is there a positive scenario? Does Europe and the world get out of these twin existential crises and this global disorder? Can you cheer us up before supper?
Yeah, no, I think, first of all, I think that the Ukrainian situation is at least as important as Greece, and it has a much greater hope of a positive outcome, because, as I said, Greece is a kind of poisoned situation where everybody has, all sides have made lots of mistakes, and there is a lot of hostility and a lot of negative sentiments, so much so that both sides seem are willing to do something to hurt the other side, even if it hurts them, as long as it hurts the other side more. So if you want to go back to, well, we can go back to Greece. If you could muddle through by, instead of actually writing off the debt, just extend and pretend, and just keep the primary surplus somewhere between 1.5% and 3%, and that would be the muddling through. But instead of primary surplus, because of the way it is being handled, you don't have a primary surplus now, because the Greek economy has actually collapsed. So that gives you an idea of how poisoned that situation is. Now, let's go to Ukraine, and there, if I said 3 conditions for making an investment, and a profitable investment in Ukraine. One is that the allies of Ukraine have to make a political commitment to do what it takes, using Draghi's famous term, to help Ukraine not only to survive, but actually to flourish. What happened?
We've hit the 35-minute mark, George, but it's your show, so I think you can carry on. We're talking about Ukraine flourishing now. The 3 conditions for the investment.
Yeah, okay. So the first one is this commitment, a political commitment. The second, you have to find a source of financing that would enable Europe to give financial assistance on a much larger scale and in an appropriate manner, and in particular to provide political risk insurance for people investing in Ukraine, because that's what would provide the incentive to invest there. And third, you have to enable, or you have to have a lasting ceasefire. And for that, Ukraine has to be able to rebuild its ability to put up resistance in case Putin decides to move from hybrid peace to hybrid war, because when he sees Ukraine succeeding, he would be more than tempted to do it, and so there has to be a cost that would prevent him from doing that. So for that, you need to then have a strategy, a winning strategy, which is that it's not enough to have sanctions, because sanctions merely reinforce Putin's narrative that all his problems are due to the hostility of the West, the determination of the West to destroy Russia. And that's a valid narrative, and people in Russia actually believe it. And that would enable Putin to take a lot of pain and survive, just as Ukraine is taking a lot of pain and surviving. So the only way you could put the lie to it, if the sanctions were counterbalanced by effective assistance to Ukraine, that would enable Ukraine to flourish, not just to survive, because then Ukraine would turn into a role model for people who are currently under Putin's domination to try to imitate it. And that would then bring about eventually a change in Russia. So these are the stakes.
Okay, those are pretty high stakes, and I'm very pleased that we're concluding on a
hear by
note
the
not
pitch of her
of
voice this is
interwar
wrapping
Germany,
up.
but of a return to democracy in Russia.
You can tell by the pitch of her voice.
Thank you
like,
so much, George. It's a pleasure to listen to you from me.
The funniest part is it's that she gave him a hand job right after that. Like, that's not like shown on here, like the rub and tug or whatever, and it was probably pretty gross, like yuck. But Chrystia Freeland has many powers, and like being able to give George Soros a handy after her very fake interview. Yeah. I'm just kidding. Anyhow, we're trying to find interesting segments to show on here, and when I saw that, I thought that it probably would be somewhat interesting. So we showed it. We'll try to find something else for tomorrow. Again, we've got another month before Parliament opens again, and we're going to try to find interesting ways to tell the stories about what's been going on in Parliament. Like I say, I don't know everything about Parliament, but I'm getting caught up pretty quickly. I started doing this channel like 3 months ago, just having some fun with doing some broadcasts with the question periods. But then started taking it more seriously. I know how to edit and throw some stories together. I know that I seem very right-wing. I am not right-wing. I'm just a voter and do not like what I see when I watch YouTube and other ways that I get my media, like, it's very upsetting when you start to uncover, like, how dishonest some of these politicians are. Like, Chrystia Freeland, I don't mind saying, is an absolute liar in my mind. Like, I make fun of her on here all the time, like, for being a witch or whatever. That's light. She's a lot worse than a witch. Like, but also we try to keep it light and fun. She's easy to poke fun at because she's such a jackass, but it's not funny, like, the consequence of their decision making on us, like, regular people. It's terrible how tough times have been. Like, I'm a good I don't know what you call it, like a water measure, like, or watermark, that I'm a single person, have always been this way. I don't have kids. I don't have an ex-wife, nothing like that. It's always been the same, always owned a house, always, same job, whatever. I used to be able to save money. I don't save money anymore. Like, and I don't care about that because I just don't care. But if I wanted to be able to save money, I should be able to do that. And these times, and that, again, I don't mean to sound spoiled when I know there's people going to food banks and shit like that. I'm aware, but I am aware and need to get the message out there that there's something scandalous going on in our government, guys. Like, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist or anything like that. Like, you don't have to be a conspiracy theorist to know that the WEF is a major issue for a country like ours with the influence it has on our government and the current cabinet. Like, and probably the next government's cabinet. Like, they're that strong, that big and strong. Anyhow, we're going to get going. I'm Aaron, Question Period Canada. Thank you very much for watching. I love hanging out here. It's so much fun. I kind of feel like I have a community now. If you ever, like, not just comment, but look at the other comments. People are pretty good on here. There's, like, a crazy lady named Flora that's always, like, preaching the good word for the liberals. Let her have her way. Like, say whatever she wants. She's harmless. Like, that's the nice thing. People should be allowed to speak freely. She's on here just saying, oh, Trudeau's great or what. Who cares? That's your opinion. Fine. We've got a community, though, and that's exciting. There wasn't one there before. We get like 10,000 comments a week. It's crazy. We got to go. Season's greetings. Happy New Year. I'm Aaron. We'll be back tomorrow with something else. Maybe we'll be back online here again tonight. Who knows? Thank you all for watching. Appreciate anybody that takes a couple of minutes out of their day to watch some of this foolishness. We are just trying to have fun with Canadian politics. That's it. We're out. Gone.